If you were to go out into the Persian sector and ask about Galatian Academy, you'd inevitably end up with as many rumours as there were people. The centre of learning had this almost mythical reputation, which only became more and more outlandish with every year. After all, it was just a single station in the middle of nowhere. It had theoretical support of hegemony government, sure, but it had no fleet protecting it, and, seemingly, no defences at all. And yet, every time some overly ambitious pirate tried to raid it, they always vanished without a trace, and life in the Academy continued uninterrupted. Lately, however, as Mr. Carter and his company have noted, the Academy was more often than not simply closed for business. For as they arrived from their last delivery mission seeking answers about their mysterious encounter in the void, they were once again halted on approach. Hello, welcome to Academy, unidentified fleet. Wait, no, not identified, hold on. A cheerful but slightly disorganized voice said over the comm. Okay, let me start again. Hello, Cart Logistics. We are so very pleased to see you. Now, if you would be so kind, please keep your distance from the station. The Provost has instituted a full lockdown. Again? Mr. Cart replied, putting the fleet to stop. Do you have another containment breach there? Wait, no, I just realised I don't want to know. Can I speak with Academician Elec? Who? The man on the other side said, genuinely confused. There's no Elec here, sorry. Name's Alvis Sebastian, official communications chief here. Well, for the past decade or so, at least. That response got Mr. Carter and everyone else who listened in on the conversation a bit confused. Really? Then who I was talking to when I was here last time? It was... oh, I don't exactly remember, a few months ago? We brought in some databang belonging to old Provost, some calico guy. Some man named Elec processed us back then. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm afraid I never heard of him, Alvis said, apologetically. But wait, a few months ago, you said? Let me just quickly check some documents. He went silent for a few minutes, and Mr. Carter and Varuna, who was in his cabin, exchanged confused looks. Their encounters with the Academy were really not what they both expected. Eventually, however, they heard Sebastian's voice once again. Fascinating. Look, it connected itself to our internal systems like it's nothing. We have to... sorry for that. I'm back with your answers. I'm afraid I have to inform you that Academician Elec never existed. So what? Was that some kind of a scam? Varuna asked. What? No, you misunderstood me. It wasn't anything malicious. Back then you just happened to arrive when we had a bit of a containment breach in the quantum labs. A very fascinating cascade happened. Wait, no, I'm not allowed to talk about it. Anyway, the universe was destroyed back then. Fortunately, it immediately reformed itself back together, as we predicted. Well, not exactly. You see, it reformed itself with almost exactly same set of variables. Something like 99.99 and great many 9%. Almost perfect reconstruction, you see. Unfortunately, that tiny bit of variables that didn't make it in included Academician Elec, and the Provost is now bald for some reason. Maybe some other issues out there, but shouldn't affect anything. I see, Mr. Cart said, trying to unpack what he just heard. It was probably wiser to not think about it, but one thing seemed odd there. But if you really remade the entire universe, then how do you remember Mr. Elec? And how do we remember him? Well, as for us, we have a special shielded database where we keep information about all previous versions of the universe. I just went there and checked it. Did you know that 11 iterations ago, our ancient ancestors from Earth shared their homeworld with sentient moth people? As for you, though, I have no idea, and it's fascinating. Means that there's another variable we haven't accounted for. Once we're open for visitors again, you have to come in so we can experiment, interview you. But not now, we're closed. Mr. Cart looked at his second-in-command, shook his head and decided to not pursue this line of questioning, not if he valued what little was left of his sanity after a lifetime in space. Very well, we'll be keeping our distance then, but we do have some questions which we can just ask over the comms, so... And then he told Sebastian everything about their mysterious encounter with an unknown object in hyperspace, and how it affected the fleet, though Mr. Cart carefully omitted the fact that he was affected there as well. However, when he finished, Alvis just shook his head. "That is a fascinating story indeed, sir, but I'm afraid that rules and regulations of the Academy forbid me from... excuse me a moment. Are you sure, madam?" "Very well then, I'll try. Yes, well, the Provost decided that, given the circumstances, we are willing to remove some of the restrictions for you. I'm afraid, however, that it won't come cheap." "Of course it won't." Mr. Cart shook his head. "Goddamn scam artists everywhere. How much creds do I have to transfer?" "Creds? Oh, no, there's been another misunderstanding here. We don't want you to pay. We want you to help us with certain, operational difficulties outside of the Academy. You know, places we can't really go ourselves, either for lack of space or experience, or, well, a lack of large amount of heavily armed bodyguards. The Provost has decided that, in exchange for your help, she will release the information about hyperspace wildlife to you, and she'll even pay you for it. Doesn't that sound perfect?" "Maybe. Depends on the jobs you have for us." "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. It's nothing complicated. At least, nothing complicated for an experienced captain, who I'm sure you are. Anyways, I'm sending the details now. I'm sure you're the right company for the job." And indeed, it seemed that Cart Logistics was pretty much tailored to the contracts given to them by the Academy, mostly thanks to bizarre mix of people which made it up. The first job was a cakewalk, a taxi service for some bigwig academician. Sebastian vaguely alluded to potential problems and people who might try to intercept said academician, especially since, as it turned out, this particular passenger had some rather high-level connections to Tritakian Corporation. However, with Mr. Cart's navigational knowledge and his handmade signature jammer, if there even were troublemakers out there, they never even noticed that Cart Logistics slipped right past them. And while the regular crew considered the trip short and uneventful, the passenger in question was not very pleased with it. "Madam, I do thank you for delivering me here swiftly," the academician said to Varuna as she was preparing to board the shuttle. "But I do hope we won't have to work together in the future. This trip was probably the most terrifying experience of my life." Varuna raised an eyebrow at that and urged the woman to continue. "Well, I knew the Academy hired freelancers for this job, but what they didn't tell me was that I'd be traveling with a group of hardened criminals." "I'm sorry to break it to you, miss, but we're not criminals," Varuna said firmly. "We're just a small private logistics company, similar to many others out there. We even pay taxes, when we can't avoid it." "Oh, then you're trying to tell me that the shipping lanes of the Persian sector are filled to the brim with people who clearly are former pirates or pathers or thieves and murderers? Madam, I often travelled between my home on Kulan and the Academy, and the corporate vessels hired by my family were always staffed by the most exquisite and civilized people. Here, on the other hand, I couldn't get any sleep because the crewmates kept shouting and drinking pretty much all the time, and I'm almost sure some of them even used drugs." "Truly, a nightmare beyond human comprehension," Varuna said, rolling her eyes. "Yes, how can you walk with such barbarians? And more so, how can you even work on ships like that? I went on a few trips around the vessel when it was mostly quiet, and I found out at least 24 serious workplace safety risks. The Academy would never stand for that." "Indeed, because unlike us, they can afford proper maintenance," Varuna replied, but the academician wasn't listening, too absorbed in her own tirade. "And then, when I went to the cargo hold, I found out tanks filled with human organs, and ones clearly not grown in approved Tritac laboratories at that. Miss, I can guarantee you that these goods were acquired and produced completely legally," Varuna said, trying her best to keep a straight face. This woman reminded her of her Ludwig quite a lot. It seemed that both Tritakian and the Academy liked to keep its people away from the more real parts of the life in the sector. "Madam, some of those organs still had body parts attached to them, very shoddily chopped body parts. And finally there was this man, this crazy, terrifying bald man in pitch black suit, who kept accosting me in the canteen and just stared at me. Yesterday, when I tried to eat breakfast, he walked up to me and showed me his collection of knives," she said, and shuddered with terror at the very memory of that encounter. "Some of them still had blood splatters on them. I thought he was going to carve me to pieces." "Oh, that wasn't some crazy murderer. That was our onboard surgeon, Dr. Disco. He's, quite obsessed with his tools, and with the fact that he could never afford education in your academy. But hey, if he showed you his scalpels, it means he wanted to impress you. Would you like me to give him your com frequency so you could continue your conversations?" No, please, there's no need for that," the academician said, shaking. "I'd rather not involve myself with professionals like him. Now please, can I go? I can't stand the smell of this ship any longer. Ah, there's the shuttle, great. Here's your payment. Please use it to install more showers, would you?" And with that, she boarded the shuttle so fast she almost tripped while going through the airlock, leaving bemused Varuna alone. Such adorable naivety, she thought, but then agreed that some of her crewmates could pay a bit more attention to personal hygiene. Or, well, they could pay any attention at all to it. But then something else, like always, demanded her attention, and she could only hope that one day smelly coworkers would be the biggest of her problems. The second job turned out to be easy as well, even though, at first, it didn't seem like it. Apparently, some older member of the Ludic Path had a crisis of faith, and after finding a piece of ancient pre-collapse technology, decided to not cleanse it with holy flames like Prophet demanded, but to instead sell it to Academy for a hefty profit. Zala was very happy when she heard that and mentioned something that it always made her day when pragmatism won over religion. Unfortunately, by the time Cart Logistics arrived in business, the Pather already started to have second thoughts, and it quickly became clear that he wouldn't release the tech without significantly larger payment than what was agreed upon. And while the Academy did provide Mr. Cart with some funds, and he was more than happy to spend them, he wasn't all that eager to shell out tens of thousands of his own S-creds. He argued with the Pather for almost half an hour over the comm, but it was clear that this discussion wasn't going anywhere, at least until the moment when Mr. Cart was all but ready to disconnect, when Zala asked for a private line to their contact. Tired of dealing with this nonsense, her boss agreed, and exactly 2 minutes later he was contacted by the Pather on the surface of business again, except this time the man sounded decidedly less demanding. In fact, his voice trembled a little and he agreed to the pre-appointed price before Mr. Cart could open his mouth. He wondered briefly what Zala told him, and then decided that it may be better to not know, considering that the man now sounded like someone on the verge of having a panic attack. So he quickly agreed to the deal, transferred the credits and sent Varuna in a shuttle to pick up a cargo container with this mysterious secret tech. He wanted to thank the contact for finally coming to reason, but the man disconnected himself as soon as the deal was done, constantly repeating that they won't hear from him ever again. Mr. Cart sent few hundred S-creds as bonus to Zala, and made a mental note to never get on her bad side. If she could terrify members of the Path, she could probably do unspeakable things to the fleet. It was really better to not ask, and besides, there was no time for it, because as soon as Varuna returned, a group of people gathered in the cargo hold and started wondering just what the hell this piece of technology even was. "It's probably something medical," Dr. Disco said, poking a few glass vials and tanks on the side of the machine. "You put chemicals or medicines here, and there is enough space for a person to crawl inside. Maybe it's some kind of automatic operating table." Varuna looked at the battered and scorched piece of metal with skepticism. "I feel like it wouldn't have all those drills and laser cutters on the inside if it was a medical machine, or at least I hope no one used something like that on people. Still, your theory's way better than mine. Before I saw all those tools inside, I thought it was some kind of fabricator. You know, like the ones in old Holovitz. You'd walk up to it, say, Earl Grey, hot, and it would give you a cup of tea. If that's the case, then old domain humans had way too much money on their hands, if they wasted it for a machine like that," Zala said. She came on board to see what her short talk with the Pather brought. "But with all those drills and lasers, maybe it's some kind of fancy high-tech tattoo machine? Crawl in, get inked in 3 seconds, get back to business?" "It's neither of those," Mr. Cart said through his drone. This is a processor regeneration unit. You put in industrial nanobots in and a bunch of liquefied materials into those vials. You put malfunctioning equipment inside, and the bots would reassemble it in seconds back in perfect shape. I saw things like that before. You did? Where the hell did you even see domain tech like that, boss? Varuna wondered. In a hull of it, of course. Or in some other document I don't really remember, he replied. But if what I remember is correct, then this thing won't work anyway. It's too banged up and there's no repair nanobot swarm, which is the most important bit there. Well, maybe the Academy has one laying around somewhere, Zala said, pretending she understood what her boss just said. As long as they pay us for delivering this hunk of junk, I don't care. And that was enough of that. The machine was safely packaged and stored in a secure secret cargo compartment, because old tech like that could catch unwanted attention from great many parties around the sector, and the fleet moved on, this time to Asconia system, to visit the home of Revolutionary Council on planet Umbra, where some pirates were apparently holding one of the academicians from Galatia hostage. Now, a trip to Umbra was always an odd one. Technically speaking, the revolutionary government there presented itself as a regular, independent nation, determined to not allow Syndrian militarists to dictate their lives. In theory, they were a democracy, a stark contrast to Admiral Andrada's diktat, where only his voice had any real weight. But the truth was, of course, a lot less pleasant. Perhaps, some years ago, when the revolutionaries broke away from Syndria, they really did want to form a truly egalitarian democracy, but along the way they realized that in order to build a perfect nation, one needs a lot better conditions than they had. Locked on a small frozen planet, constantly blockaded by Syndrian fleets and unable to grow any food, Umbran leaders quickly realized that they wouldn't be able to hold on to their newfound freedom, not without making some compromises. And that led to the planet turning into an open port, where everyone, including the worst scum in the sector, could do business without fear of law and persecution. Needless to say, pirates and warlords from everywhere rushed at this opportunity to expand their influence into another sector, especially one so tightly protected as Asconia, and within few short years the planet turned into a major base for raider fleets, which were now constant thorns in Diktat's side. The original revolutionaries were quickly swept aside, but while some of them still retained some degree of power, the truth was that by now Umbra was predominantly a lawless world of brigands, and so had to be approached very carefully and quietly, because at any given moment its revolutionary brigades could decide to alleviate boredom of longer guard duties by robbing some poor, unsuspecting spacers. Fortunately, Mr. Card's jammer worked like it did before, flawlessly, and the fleet easily reached its destination, where, once again, they met with the problem of their contact demanding a lot more money than was originally agreed upon. But, just like on Bezos, here the problem was resolved quickly as well, this time thanks to House, who quickly recognized the voice of the pirate on the other side of the comm and barged into the conversation.
Duxal, for fuck's sake, you couldn't shake down a kid if your life depended on it, you worthless sack of shit,
he started. The woman on the other side tried to say something, but House wasn't going to let her speak.
I remember when you were constantly on shitter duty, back when we ran with old Captain Dante, because he couldn't even read a goddamn console right.
House, I didn't... The pirate tried, but House was in full assault mode. His life support whirred like he was about to explode.
Of course you didn't know. You never knew anything. That's why you're here trying to scam school professors instead of doing real job. Well, I usually wouldn't give a singular fuck what you do with your miserable life, but this time I have a need for this egghead you have in your custody, so how about you stop playing games? Take the money you were promised and fuck off, eh? And no, I don't want to hear anything other than yes, House from you. I know where you live. I know where your parents live. I know where your shitty little Luddite brother lives. Now, I won't inconvenience my new boss with an inconsequential little maggot like you, but if you'll cause us any more trouble, I'll take my boys. 'Cause you better believe my boys are still with me, and we will go and pay everyone you know a visit, and then we'll pay you a visit. So, Duxaldimus, do we have a deal or do we have a problem?
Duxel was quiet for a few seconds and finally, in a defeated, slightly shaky voice, said, "Yes, House, we have a deal."
"Good. Smart girl. Smart girls live longer."
House wheezed into the comm.
"Now, send the guy to these coordinates. My boss will send you your money. Take it and get a real job. You suck at pirate business anyway. And Duxel, don't make me come back here."
He shut off the comm and counted to 3, after which Varuna opened another channel to him. "So," she started, looking for the right words, "that was a bit of a spectacle from you?" The half-machine pirate scoffed.
"Not really. Told you I was good at pirating business. Can't be a good pirate if you can't intimidate people. And it helps that I knew this particular girl. We got lucky here. Probably even Ludwig could terrify that one into submission. She really should just stop pretending and go get a life on some farm somewhere."
Varuna nodded and shut off the comm, and everyone who witnessed that conversation had pretty much the same thoughts. House's behavior was like night and day. And then they thought how grateful they were that they were not on his bad side. Few minutes later, a shuttle brought the academician on board, but the man in question turned out to be one of those socially inept savant types. He muttered some combinations of numbers to himself all the time and paid no attention to anyone around him, so much that no one was sure if he even realized that he was saved. A few crewmates gently escorted him to a temporary quarter, gave him a datapad and left him alone, still muttering to himself. Then, the fleet left Umbra, with everyone now acting a lot more careful around the still friendly House. Now then, it was time to return to the Academy, but not before a quick trip to Ilm, where Mr. Cart apparently secured some kind of a very lucrative trade deal with their mysterious employer. He didn't want to say what the deal was, only that the company would no doubt benefit from it. For most people that explanation was enough. The boss didn't pry into their secrets, so they wouldn't pry into his, but Varuna was still suspicious, and used a short shore leave on Ilm Station, and spent a fair amount of her own money to make some new friends, in hopes of uncovering the identity of their secret benefactor. Mr. Cart didn't ask her where she lived during the shore leave. Granted, he never talked much with anyone, but this current silence was odd, even for him. Still, aside from confronting him openly, something which Varuna didn't want to do for many reasons, there was nothing left to do for her but wait, and so she went back to work as Cart Logistics set a course back for the Galatian Academy. But as they arrived, once again the company fleet found itself stuck outside of the station, contacted over the comm by academician Sebastian, and once again, everyone was confused just how easily the station could spot their stealthy fleet. Hello, Cart Logistics Academy here," Sebastian said over the comms. He sounded only a bit manic. "Sorry for the inconvenience, but the dock is closed right now, for your own convenience and safety, yes?" "Having problems with yet another quantum breach?" Mr. Cart asked. "Oh no, nothing so trivial," Sebastian's face on the screen said. He looked extremely pale, and his eyes were so wide they looked like two small black holes inside his face. His entire body seemed to vibrate a little bit. "This time it's the history department. Their expedition found some ancient texts which detailed some kind of academic ritual called spring break. Now, seasons don't really apply on the space station, so they decided to perform that ritual since it seemed like it was very important to ancients of old Earth. Now, the provost wasn't too happy, but decided that in the name of history, a few days of festivities wouldn't be a problem, but, well, things got a wee bit out of hand. Namely, medical got out of hand. Turns out they had enough chemicals on hand to get everyone, in the spirit of things, as they said, which is to say high. Very high. So, what started as a quiet celebration is now a rather wild party, which doesn't seem to end. I would invite you in, but the students are a bit unruly. I think last night some of them broke into Theoretical Sciences lab and brought out some things that don't exactly conform to rules of our reality, and then they poured a bucket of paint over the monument of the founding provost in the main hall." "That last bit doesn't sound that bad," Mr. Cart said, trying to stop the frantic monologue. Oh yes, normally it wouldn't be, but this wasn't actually paint, but a bucket of a self-replicating, self-aware carnivorous biomass taken from microbiology department. I have to ask them why did they even develop this in the first place, but yes, now the main hall is kinda sorta overgrown with a pulsating mass of meat that tries to eat everyone that comes close to it. Its aide dean of applied sciences, but he was so drunk the biomass spat him out, and now I think it's drunk too, cause it seems to be pulsating in rhythm with the music the students play. Right, well I hope you'll get it under control then, Mr. Cart said weakly. The academy was different than he expected, that's for sure. So I guess now it's not the best time to tell you that we've done the jobs you've given us. Jobs? Oh, yes, that, you did them, yes, very good. I should probably ask how you did manage to recover tech from Pathos and our hostage from pirates, but honestly, I'd rather not know. But yes, a reward is in order. Tell you what, send everything on a shuttle to Provost's personal docking platform, would you? At least that place should be clear of all the, festivities. Now, I'd go myself, but, well... Sebastian lowered his voice and leaned into the camera. But there's a monster guarding the door. It sounds exactly like my grandmother. Mr. Cart could clearly see on the screen that academician Sebastian was in the room alone, but then again, his dilated pupils also indicated that he may not be in the best state of mind right now, so instead, head of Cart Logistics just nodded. Very well, sending everything right now, but not before we get paid. Paid? Oh yes, credits, I sometimes forget there's a capitalist society out there. We try to remove notions of abstract currency here, you know. But yes, money, sending it now. Did I send it? Yes, I did. I think? Yes, you did, Mr. Cart said, looking at their account. The academy was a weird place, true, but also one capable of paying very well for services rendered. Pleasure doing business with you, academician. You ever need anything again? Let us know. Oh, yes, actually, now would be a very good time, the stoned scholar said, and leaned conspirationally towards the screen. You see, when the party began, some of the students kinda sorta broke into IT department's warehouse, and they kinda sorta stole something from there, boarded one of our long-range exploration ships, and went out, for a pub crawl, as they said. In fact, I think they took the object they stole to let it live a little. Now, I know how it sounds, very unprofessional and foolish indeed, trying to take in unliving object partying, but you know how it is. So yes, we'd very much like you to recover it. Oh, and our students, of course. Fine, I can do that. Do you know where they went? Yes, kinda. At first they went to Cantor's Den, but I think they partied a bit too hard there, and the pirates kicked them out. Send us a bill for all the damages they did. Quite a hefty bill. So then they decided to go and grab their mates from one of our expeditions in a Gaia system. I think their idea was to get the rest of the lads to party, as they said. We haven't heard from them since then, but they took enough drugs and booze with them to floor themselves for a month, so they're probably still there. I'm sending you coordinates of the outpost right now. Very well, we'll go right away. Well, after we buy enough fuel for the journey, which I expect to be put into our official expenses here. That is not a short trip, Mr. Cart said, looking at the map. The system they were being sent to was indeed a fair distance away. Also, you could tell us what we are trying to find. Or do you expect us to just bring everything in the outpost and hope it belongs to your IT department? Yes, that... Sebastian seemed a bit apologetic now. The thing is, see, I can't really tell you what it is. It's classified, you know, and not classified by me or the provost, but by the big people, like, you know, high hegemon big. Of course, you can expect a proper reward for it, and, personally, I'd like to ask you to preferably, you know, not mention it to anyone. The students just try to unwind a bit, no point in putting them in the spotlight. We've all been young once, weren't we? So people tell me, Mr. Cart said. He really disliked that statement. But worry not, we are discreet, especially if the money is good. And, hold on, He went silent for a few moments and then continued. And, of course, don't forget about our deal. I understand the priority of the current job, but your provost has promised us something. Yes, of course, I remember. And worry not, Madame Baird is the finest woman I know. She won't go back on her promise. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to even share with you what she knows right now, but, well, you know. Sebastian made a vague gesture here, as if trying to say that everything in the world was wrong. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really need to run. My teeth have been itching ever since we started this conversation. No, grandmother, I will not go to the church again. I want to read. Mr. Card disconnected and left the drugged-up academician to his delusions, and wondered if this entire recovery job wasn't perhaps some kind of fever dream Sebastian had. But it didn't really matter. He already made his decision when he heard that the missing object originated from AI department, or to be more precise, when Midnight Dissonant heard about it and asked him to recover it. For the first time since she joined the fleet, she sounded genuinely concerned and promised she'd reward Count Logistics for the trip, on top of whatever the Academy was paying.
You surprise us once again, Card Human,
Dissonant said through Mr. Cart's internal comm system.
It's been a great many cycles since any human was kind to us.
Well, you do pay quite handsomely for helping you, so that's not a surprise, he replied.
So you say, but we are not sure if our rewards outweigh the danger you'll be putting yourself in if others find out about our cooperation.
Then make sure they won't learn. And besides, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to forget their ideals for a good enough paycheck. Now please, transfer yourself back to your ship. We have a bit of a trip ahead of us. And, with an electric click, the comm disconnected, and Mr. Cart looked around his Spartan, silent cabin, once again alone. Midnight Dissonant was right. If anyone found out who she really was, things would become very problematic very fast. And while he didn't care much about himself, he couldn't stand the thought of something bad happening to Varuna or other crewmates in his employ because of his actions. One day, he thought, he may be forced to leave them behind, for their own safety, if he wanted to go through to the end with his plan. But that day was still a long way off. For now, Cat Logistics had other things to do, like finding the aftermath of the greatest party ever thrown in the history of mankind.